Between the Lines by Justin Lawrence. Chapter 1. The First Glance. The bell above the cafe door jingled softly as she stepped inside, shaking rain off her coat. The small town coffee shop smelled of espresso and old paper, a combination that made her chest tighten in a way she hadn't felt in years. It was quiet this early, save for a few locals nursing their mugs and the faint scratch of someone flipping pages in the corner. She made her way to her usual table by the window, the one that gave her a perfect view of the street and enough privacy to spread out her notebooks. She set her bag down and pulled a worn leather journal from her tote, flipping it open to where she'd left off last week. That's when she noticed him. He was sitting at the table across from hers, a tall man with dark hair falling slightly into his eyes, completely absorbed in a tattered book. Something about the way he held it, careful, reverent, as though each word were a secret, made her chest tighten. Their eyes met briefly, and she felt a jolt, like static electricity sliding across her skin. He smiled almost imperceptibly and returned to his reading as if nothing had happened. Curiosity won over hesitation. She picked up her notebook and, pretending to write, watched him steal glances at her. There was something magnetic about him, a dangerous kind of pull that she both wanted and feared. Minutes stretched into silence before he finally spoke, his voice low but smooth, carrying the weight of confidence. "Is that the new edition of the Velvet Manuscript?" She looked up, startled. Yes. How did you—" "I'm a writer," he said simply, closing his book with careful precision. "And I noticed things—" There was a sly humor in his tone, an undercurrent that made her pulse quicken. She wanted to protest, to brush it off, but the warmth in her chest betrayed her. "I'm a writer, too," she admitted, the words tasting strange on her tongue, like confession. "Mostly short stories, nothing published." He tilted his head, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Short stories are dangerous," he said. "They can reveal too much about a person, sometimes things they don't even know themselves." She laughed softly, and it was like a spark passing between them. Maybe that's the point. The conversation flowed easier than either expected. They talked about favorite authors, about the thrill of forbidden stories, about characters who loved in ways society frowned upon. With each shared secret, each brush of hands as they reached for coffee cups at the same time, attention grew, electric, undeniable. He leaned closer when no one else was watching, just enough that their knees brushed under the table. "There's a certain excitement," he said quietly, "in meeting someone who understands you in the way words alone can't." Her breath hitched. She nodded, unsure whether it was agreement or anticipation, or both. As the rain pattered against the window, she realized this was dangerous. She should stop herself, walk away, pretend nothing had happened. But she couldn't. Something about him, about the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, whispered promises she didn't know she wanted to hear. And for the first time in a long while, she let herself lean into that dangerous pull. Chapter 2. Coffee and Confessions. The next morning, she found herself back at the same cafe, as if the universe had conspired to bring her there. The smell of roasted beans filled her senses, grounding her, but also making her heart race. And there he was, sitting in the corner with the same book, the same unreadable expression, yet somehow more magnetic than yesterday. He looked up, caught her glance, and this time his smile was deliberate. It reached his eyes, warm and teasing, as if he'd been waiting for her. "Morning," he said, voice low, smooth, almost a purr. "Back so soon?" "Coffee," she said, setting her bag down, "and maybe a bit of company." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I don't mind sharing my company, but only if you're ready to talk about dangerous things." Her pulse quickened. "Dangerous? Stories, secrets, desires," he murmured, leaning closer across the small wooden table. The heat of his presence made her palms sweat. Some things are better whispered. She felt a shiver crawl down her spine, equal parts thrill and apprehension. Leaning slightly closer, careful to maintain the pretense of casual conversation, she asked, "Desires like in writing?" He smiled, but it was slow, knowing, teasing. "Sometimes the line between writing and reality blurs," he said. "Sometimes the character's needs bleed into our own." Her throat went dry. She wasn't sure if he was teasing her, testing her, or reading her like an open book, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she let her curiosity and longing take over. Their conversation unfolded like a dance, each word measured but loaded with meaning. They shared stories of nights spent crafting worlds where love was taboo, dangerous, forbidden, the kind that set hearts racing and bodies aching without ever touching. And all the while, their knees brushed under the table, accidental or deliberate, she couldn't tell. Every brush was electric, every glance a secret promise. "You write?" he asked softly, eyes fixed on her. "I want to see what you've created." She hesitated, but there was something in his gaze, an intensity that made it impossible to say no. She pulled out a notebook, turning to a page of her most recent story, a tale of two lovers sneaking into empty libraries, forbidden passion spilling across pages. She read aloud, her voice trembling slightly. As she spoke, he watched her like a predator savoring the scent of prey, his gaze darkening, lingering. He reached out, lightly brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold morning air. "Your words, they feel alive," he said quietly, "almost like they're meant for me." She swallowed hard, heat rising to her cheeks. Maybe they are." For a moment, the cafe ceased to exist. The rain outside, the baristas moving behind the counter, the hum of conversation all faded. There was only the two of them, the unspoken tension, the forbidden electricity that threatened to ignite at any moment. He leaned even closer, his lips brushing the side of her ear. "I wonder," he whispered, voice low and intimate, "what it would be like if we didn't just write about it." Her breath hitched. She should have stopped him, should have pulled away, should have remembered that this was dangerous, forbidden. But she didn't. Her pulse was wild, her body aching with anticipation, and for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, the stories they could create together. Chapter 3: Shared Secrets. By midweek, the cafe had become their ritual. No one else seemed to matter. It was just the two of them, their notebooks, and the stolen glances that grew bolder each time. He arrived first that afternoon, a notebook tucked under one arm, and chose the same corner table, leaving enough space for her to slide in across from him. She did, heart hammering, sensing that today would be different. "Ready to write?" he asked, voice low, thick with an unspoken promise. She nodded, pretending calm, though her fingers trembled as she opened her journal. The notebook felt heavier than usual, loaded with desire, with words she hadn't yet dared to speak aloud. "You've been thinking about me," he said suddenly, leaning across the table so their knees brushed again. His breath was warm, carrying the faint scent of coffee and something darker, more intoxicating. Maybe," she admitted, unable to hide the flush creeping up her neck. "I can't stop." He smiled knowingly, sliding his hand lightly across the table until his fingers brushed hers. The touch was deliberate, electric. Her pulse raced, every nerve alive. "Then let's stop pretending," he murmured. "Come upstairs with me. I have a place, private, quiet, and we can explore what your words have been hinting at." Her breath hitched. This was forbidden, dangerous, reckless, but something inside her pushed her forward. She nodded. The apartment was small, warm, and cluttered with books. Dust motes floated in the soft light, filtering through half-closed blinds. As soon as the door closed, the world outside disappeared. He pulled her close immediately, pressing his lips to hers with a hungry intensity that stole her words. Their mouths moved together like they had been waiting for this moment for months. She tasted the faint bitterness of coffee on him, and it drove her wild. Hands roamed freely, exploring curves, tracing lines of muscle and skin that had only existed in fantasies until now. Every touch sent shocks through her, every whisper of his breath across her ear igniting a fire she didn't know how to control. "I've imagined this," he murmured, sliding his hand under her blouse, "more times than I can count." "Me too," she admitted, voice trembling. "Every story I've written you in it." His lips moved down her neck, teeth grazing lightly, eliciting a gasp. She arched into him, pressing closer, needing more. Clothes became unnecessary obstacles, discarded carelessly as they explored each other with greedy urgency. She felt him, raw and insistent, and she surrendered completely. Every moan, every shiver was mirrored in his desire. He whispered her name, soft and demanding, and in that moment, nothing existed but heat, touch, and the thrilling danger of what they were doing. Time became meaningless. Their bodies moved together, in sync, a physical echo of the emotional storm that had been building between them. They explored every inch of each other, learning what made the other gasp, shiver, beg. Every touch was a confession, every gasp a story, and the room around them faded to nothing. When it was over, they lay tangled, sweaty and sated, hearts pounding. She could feel the electric charge of the forbidden, the weight of secrecy pressing against her chest. "I shouldn't," she whispered, burying her face in his shoulder. "We can't." "We already did," he murmured back, brushing her hair from her face. "And now, we can't stop." And in that tiny apartment, surrounded by books and shadows, they made a silent vow. Whatever came next, whatever danger, guilt, or scandal, they would keep writing, keep meeting, and keep this forbidden passion alive. Chapter 4. Crossing the Line. The rain had returned that evening, hammering against the cafe windows, trapping the world outside in a gray haze. She slid into their corner booth, notebook clutched in her hands, heart thudding in anticipation. He was already there, leaning forward, eyes dark, smoldering, like a fire she couldn't resist. "You came," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "I couldn't not come," she admitted, trying to steady her shaking hands. Her body betrayed her, heat crawling along her skin at the thought of him. He reached across the table, brushing the back of her hand, and that single touch made her pulse spike. It wasn't casual anymore, it was deliberate, claiming. Every stolen glance, every brush of skin had been leading to this. "Let's go somewhere private," he whispered, sliding a folded slip of paper across the table. It had the address of a small rented cabin just outside town, far enough from prying eyes. Her stomach tightened. She knew the risk. The thrill of secrecy only made it hotter. She nodded, unable to speak, and they slipped out into the rain together, the world narrowing down to the promise of what awaited. The cabin smelled of wood, fire, and faint leather, earthy and intimate. The windows were fogged from the chill outside, but inside heat built between them in a way that made her knees weak. He didn't hesitate. He took her in his arms, pressing her against him, and kissed her with the kind of urgency that stole her breath. Hands roamed freely now, no longer tentative. Every curve, every sensitive line was explored with greedy fascination. "I've thought about this," he murmured, voice low against her ear, "about you, about us. Every night," she moaned softly, arching into him. "I've imagined it too, all the things I couldn't write down." Clothes fell away, one piece at a time, discarded like barriers. Her body was bare under his gaze, raw and trembling with anticipation. His hands memorized her, tracing, teasing, igniting every nerve ending. She felt him fully, heat pressing against her, the delicious friction of desire turned tangible. He moved with an almost desperate need, matching every sigh, every gasp she gave. The way he touched her, kissed her, held her, it was no longer just lust. It was intimacy carved from secrecy, a raw connection that went beyond words. "You're mine," he growled, voice thick with hunger. "Even if the world can't know." Um, yes, she whispered, surrendering completely. "Even if it's forbidden." Time lost all meaning. The room was filled with their gasps, whispers, and the rhythmic sounds of bodies moving together. Each movement, each touch, was both a confession and a defiance, a testament to the forbidden love they were creating in the shadows. Afterwards, they collapsed in a tangle of limbs, sweat slicked and trembling. The intensity lingered, leaving them gasping and shivering, hearts pounding in sync. "You've crossed the line," she whispered, pressing her face into his chest, "but I can't go back." He kissed the top of her head, holding her close. "Neither can I," he admitted. "And I don't want to." Outside the storm raged, but inside that small cabin, the world had shrunk to them. Two writers, two lovers, tangled in a forbidden passion that had only just begun. Chapter 5, Addiction. It started small, stolen glances, fleeting touches, but soon she couldn't imagine a day without him. The cafe was no longer a casual meeting spot. It was their anchor, the place where their secret could breathe before they vanished. In the private rooms, apartments, cabins, anywhere no one could see. She found herself arriving early, heart racing, notebook trembling in her hands. And he was always there, waiting, smoldering, magnetic. Sometimes she wondered if it was the danger of it that thrilled her more than the man himself. "Miss me?" he asked one afternoon, leaning across the table, fingers brushing hers with the deliberate lightness of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Maybe," she admitted, voice unsteady. "I can't stop thinking about you, about us." His smile was slow, knowing, wicked, good, he murmured, leaning closer. "Because I've been thinking about you. All day and all night." They began sneaking away more often. A rented cabin, an empty office at the back of a bookstore, a quiet apartment upstairs, anywhere they could make their desire tangible, real, and unrestrained. And each time it was more intense, more desperate, more consuming. In one of those stolen afternoons, she felt herself tremble as he pressed her against the wall of the cabin, lips devouring hers, hands roaming over curves she hadn't even known were aching to be touched. Clothes disappeared, barriers gone, and the room became a furnace of heat and want. "You drive me insane," he whispered against her throat, teeth grazing, eliciting a shiver that ran from her scalp to her toes. Every thought, every word, every story. "It all leads me to you. I can't get enough," she gasped, fingers gripping the backs of his shoulders. You, you make everything feel alive, and alive it was. Every encounter became more intense, a tangle of limbs, whispered names, and forbidden confessions. Every touch was memorized, every gasp cataloged in their minds. The line between desire and obsession blurred. She started carrying her notebook not to write stories, but to record every stolen moment, every heated encounter, like a diary of sin. Even during the day, she found herself thinking of him. The way he had pressed into her last night, the heat of his hands tracing her body, the low growl of his voice as he claimed her. Every mundane task became torture. Every glance from strangers, every passing car outside the cafe reminded her of their secret and made her ache to be back in his arms. One evening, after a rain-soaked walk, they ended up in the cabin again. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His hands and lips did all the talking. She surrendered completely, moving with him as if their bodies were one. Every motion raw, urgent, and unrelenting. Later, lying together, her head on his chest, she realized with a shiver that this wasn't just desire. It was addiction. "I can't live without this," she admitted, voice soft, almost frightened. "Nor can I," he replied, brushing her hair from her face. "And we won't. Not ever. No matter what happens." They didn't notice the world outside, the small town streets, the eyes that might be watching, the whispers that might come someday. All that mattered was the burning, all-consuming passion that had grown between them. It was dangerous. It was forbidden, and they were hooked. Chapter 6, Shadows of Guilt. The small town streets had always seemed safe, familiar, predictable, but now every glance felt like a potential exposure. Every cafe visit, every stolen meeting carried the invisible weight of discovery. Their passion, once heady and free, had become edged with tension, as if the town itself was waiting to pull them apart. She noticed it first, the way a friend's curious gaze lingered too long, the barista's subtle questioning glance. Even the casual passerby seemed to whisper, though no one had said a word. It was maddening and thrilling. At the cafe, they kept up the pretense. Laughter, shared books, flirtatious glances that seemed innocent to anyone else. But under the table, knees brushed, fingers entwined, and small, forbidden touches sent jolts of heat through them. Every stolen caress, every secret smile was a defiance of the danger that loomed. Later that night, in the safety of the cabin, the tension exploded. He pinned her against the wall as soon as the door closed, lips crashing against hers with a desperate intensity that mirrored their guilt. "I shouldn't," she gasped between kisses, her body trembling. Someone could... Someone will never know, he murmured against her neck, teeth grazing her skin. Not here, not now. And besides, his hands roamed with reckless abandon, memorizing curves, eliciting moans she could barely contain. We've already crossed every line. Her protest melted into gasps, every word replaced by breathless whimpers and shivers of desire. Clothes became irrelevant, discarded as if the floor demanded them gone. Every touch, every kiss, every low, hungry whisper stoked the fire that had been burning between them for weeks. "You're mine," he growled, fingers tracing lines that left her trembling. "Even if the world would never allow it." "Yes," she admitted, voice breaking, "even if it's forbidden." They moved together with an urgency born of guilt and passion intertwined. Every motion, every whisper carried a thrill. The danger made every touch, every gasp, every shiver sharper, more consuming. Afterward, tangled and exhausted, she lay against his chest, heart hammering, mind racing. The thrill of secrecy, the addictive danger was intoxicating, but the weight of it pressed down on her chest. We can't keep doing this," she whispered, voice trembling. "It's too much. Someone will find out, or worse." He held her tighter, lips pressing to her hair. "Then we live in the shadows. We steal every moment we can, because what we have, it's worth everything." But even as he spoke, a shadow passed over his face, and she saw it. Hesitation, fear, the first hint that their forbidden love might not survive the town, the secrets, the obsession. And yet, in the heat of the moment, none of that mattered. Desire always won. They clung to each other as the night deepened, the storm outside mirroring the storm within, a tempest of lust, love, and the creeping knowledge that their passion carried a cost. Chapter 7, The Manuscript. The cabin had become more than a refuge. It was their sanctuary, their playground, their confessional. Between whispered words and fevered touches, they began something new, a collaborative manuscript, a story that mirrored the heat and secrecy of their own lives. He spread pages across the wooden table, scribbled notes, and half-finished paragraphs scattered like confessions. She leaned over, breath catching at the way his hand lingered on hers as he passed her a pen. "What if we made it real?" he murmured, voice low, nearly a growl. "Not just the story, but the tension, the desire, the everything." Her pulse quickened. "You mean like us?" He nodded, eyes darkening with a hunger that mirrored her own. "Exactly. The secrecy, the danger, the passion." Every line we write, every character we create, I want to feel it physically. And so they began. Writing sessions became entwined with touches, kisses, and eventually more. Each paragraph, each scene of forbidden desire in their manuscript was mirrored by their bodies in the cabin. Characters kissed, touched, and confessed sins that their own lips whispered moments later. She shivered as he leaned over her, fingers tracing the curve of her shoulder, lips brushing her ear. "You're better than any character I've ever written," he murmured, voice thick with lust. "And I want to live every line we write. I want that too," she admitted, breathless, feeling herself ache for him in ways no story could contain. The writing sessions blurred into hours of fevered passion. He traced her spine with one hand while guiding her pen with the other. Every story they wrote became a dance, a reflection of the intensity that bound them. They whispered names, moans, and confessions into the room, their own forbidden love fueling every sentence. By the time they collapsed, tangled among notebooks and discarded clothes, sweat slicked and trembling, the manuscript had grown thick with erotic confession, a testament to their obsession. But even in the haze of pleasure, a shadow lingered, guilt, fear, and the creeping knowledge that the town outside would never understand what they were creating. "I can't tell anyone," she whispered, resting her head on his chest. "This, us, it has to stay secret." He kissed the top of her hair, holding her close. "I know, but the story, it'll survive. Even if the world can't see us, these words will remember everything. And in that cabin, surrounded by books, half-finished stories, and the lingering heat of their bodies, they realized something dangerous. The line between fiction and reality had completely vanished. Every desire they wrote became real, every touch mirrored in ink and skin. Their passion was unstoppable, their love was forbidden, and every word, every gasp, every shiver pulled them deeper into a world where only they existed. Two writers, two lovers, addicted to each other and to the stories they could only share in secret. Chapter 8. The Breaking Point. The cafe had never felt smaller, nor the world outside more suffocating. Every glance from a passerby, every curious barista, made her pulse spike. They had been careful, meticulous even, but the small-town eyes were sharp, and gossip was a quiet predator. That afternoon, as she slid into their corner booth, she noticed a familiar face. Someone who shouldn't have been there, watching more closely than seemed coincidental. Her stomach dropped. He arrived moments later, notebook tucked under his arm, eyes scanning hers like he already knew the storm brewing. "Trouble?" he asked quietly, sliding into the seat across from her. "Yes," she admitted, voice tight. "Someone's watching, noticing things." He leaned forward, brushing a hand over hers beneath the table. "Then we can't stop. Not now, not ever. We need it too much." The danger only heightened the heat between them. Every stolen touch, every brush of skin under the table became a defiance of the world outside. Their desire, already raw and consuming, became desperate, urgent, unrelenting. That night, in the safety of the cabin, the tension erupted. Clothes were gone in seconds, hands roaming greedily, lips devouring with a hunger born of fear and longing. Every touch, every whisper, every gasp carried the weight of forbidden love and the intoxicating thrill of near discovery. "You're driving me insane," she moaned, arching into him as his hands traced the lines of her body with merciless intent. I can't." "You don't have to," he growled, pressing her against him, bodies moving in a rhythm as old as desire itself. "Just feel it, feel us. The world can't touch this." They surrendered to each other completely. Every kiss, every shiver, every whispered confession was a rebellion. The manuscript lay forgotten on the table, abandoned in the heat of flesh and fire. Yet even as they moved together, her mind flickered with guilt, fear, and an unspoken dread that their secret might not survive. Afterward, tangled and spent, they lay in each other's arms, the rain outside hammering against the windows like a drumbeat of warning. I, I don't know how long we can keep doing this, she whispered, voice trembling. He pressed his lips to her temple, heartbeat steady against hers. Then we take it one moment at a time, he murmured. Every touch, every story, every secret, we make it count because this, us, it's worth it. But even as he spoke, neither of them could ignore it. The tension, the danger, the creeping knowledge that passion this raw, love this forbidden, could not last forever. And somewhere deep inside, both knew a storm was coming that no heat, no desire, no words could ever tame. Chapter 9, the tragic end. They had ignored the warning signs for too long. Every stolen glance, every whispered word, every fevered touch had drawn them closer and closer to the edge. That night, the cabin felt different. Shadows stretched longer, the silence heavier, as if the walls themselves were aware of the storm about to hit. She arrived first, heart pounding, knowing he would follow. She wanted him, craved him, but an unease prickled beneath her skin. He arrived moments later, eyes dark, intense, carrying the same tension she felt. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms, lips crashing against hers with a hunger born of desperation. They moved together like flames, consuming each other, desperate for contact, for confirmation that their love, their desire, still existed. Clothes fell, bodies pressed together, every touch heightened by the knowledge of what was at stake. "Don't leave me," she whispered, trembling as he kissed her neck, teeth grazing lightly, hands roaming with a possessive urgency. "I won't," he promised, voice low, growling against her skin. "Not ever, not now." But even as they surrendered to passion, there was fear beneath it. The small town eyes, the rumors, the risks they had ignored for too long. And then, as if fate itself intervened, the door creaked open. A figure stood there, unexpected, unwelcome, unyielding. A friend? A neighbor? She couldn't tell. All she knew was that their secret had been exposed. Panic surged through them, mingling with desire, and they clung to each other desperately, needing one last moment of connection before reality crashed down. Every touch was more frantic, more desperate, more raw than ever before. "Stay with me," he groaned, pressing her against him as if he could shield her from the world. I can't," she whispered, tears mingling with sweat. "It's too late." Their final moments together were frantic, consuming, a blazing storm of lust and love. Every kiss, every shiver, every whispered confession became a memory burned into their bodies. And then, with a final, shuddering embrace, it was over. The aftermath was silence. The cabin, once their sanctuary, felt cold, empty, and haunted. Their love, their passion, their secret, the story they had written together remained, but they could no longer inhabit it. She left first, heart shattered, notebook clutched to her chest. He stayed behind, staring at the scattered pages, the remnants of their fevered nights, and whispered her name into the quiet, knowing it would never be the same. And in the small town, where whispers traveled fast and secrets couldn't hide forever, their forbidden love became legend, a story of passion, desire, and tragedy intertwined. Chapter 10, Aftermath. The cafe never felt the same again. The corners where they had shared whispered secrets, the table where knees had brushed and fingers had intertwined, it all felt empty, haunted by memories that refused to fade. She returned once, notebook in hand, to try and capture what remained. But the words felt hollow. The passion, the desire, the stolen hours, they existed only in memory now, raw and untouchable. Every line she wrote reminded her of him, the heat of his touch, the intensity of his gaze, the forbidden fire that had consumed them both. He stayed away from the cafe. He stayed away from her. The manuscript they had written together remained unfinished, a relic of their obsession. Yet it carried every moment, every gasp, every whispered confession, their love immortalized in ink, even if it couldn't live in the world. Sometimes she thought she could feel him nearby, a brush of air, A shadow in the corner, a memory made flesh in the heartbeat of the small town. She would close her eyes and remember the warmth, the heat, the raw, desperate love that had burned between them. And in the quiet of her apartment, she opened the manuscript one last time. Every word they had written together echoed with desire, danger, and the knowledge that some love was never meant to last. It was theirs, and theirs alone, a story no one could ever claim. She whispered his name softly, a prayer, a goodbye, a confession. Always, she said, tears streaking her face, always ours. The world moved on outside. The cafe windows, people laughing, gossiping, living ordinary lives. But inside her heart, inside the pages of their story, the fire remained, a forbidden, passionate love that had been real, intense, and unforgettable. And somewhere, she knew he felt it too. The manuscript closed, the chapter of their lives ended, but the echoes of their passion, the thrill of their forbidden love, and the shadows of their desire lingered forever, like smoke in the air, visible only to those who had lived it. The end.